like I do, 18 back. So can't wait to get back, but I think that we are saving the best for last because we have two very special guests from the system integrator segment, meaning that they're the one who, in my mind, use my own terminologies that bring the solution to the customer. Not only doing the design, but also do the support and a lot of good stuff. So it's very excited to have you guys to be here and then really kind of bring the new perspective. We have 3 sessions up to this point already from the control lighting manufacturers, and they give us a really good insight upon where they see for the connected lighting. But I want to complement that with these 2 gentlemen who, I'll let you do the introduction, but I think they combined, you have 55 years of industry experience. So it's like, wow, I'm sure there are a lot of great lessons learned, and that's why I want to have this be the opportunity to talk about things that we don't see, because we provide a component to the OEMs, and then you guys bring this full solution to the end customers. I think that's really interesting last step in the journey that I want to put more spotlight on. So thank you very much for coming in. So Benjamin, I will let you introduce to the audience yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Robert, and thank you for having us. Just to clarify, I think 45 of those years are with Rich. So
okay, maybe I'm upselling it a little bit.
No, it's fine. I'm Benjamin Buchanan, the CEO of Smarter Building Technologies Alliance. We are a systems integrator, and we are approaching the market here with advanced controls in mind, in IoT and intelligent buildings. Realizing that there's been a shift lately that technology has taken over the LED industry, right? So, or the lighting industry, which now we almost call it the LED industry, and it needs to. We all need to pause, and we may need to change our business models. The technology, it's finding its way deeper into the fixture, deeper into products that never had technology before. That were always analog, and that actually creates some challenges for us because the way that our industry has been set up for the last 100 years hasn't really been enabled for technology. So we believe we have a nice model that's going to be able to integrate technology into buildings, and so hopefully we can talk about that today and about what Signify is doing to enable that as well, and how we can all work together to change the industry.
So what's your background?
Well, so my background is I started out as a contractor and retrofit, millions and millions of square feet for the first 10 years of my career. Then got into the product side and started by working in just the basic commodity lighting space, selling fluorescent components and all the different components. We would represent sensors and everything, Bill Brown sales, if you guys know it. And then made my way into sensors. We represented Wattstopper, and then I ended up opening an agency that represented a lot of different controls lines, and then was working to represent Daintree, and they said, rather than represent us, I think you need to come over. So spent 6 years at Daintree, starting that company with them and building it up, and then eventually they were acquired by GE and now Current. And this, it made a transition for me to say, I've seen enough sides of this industry. I think it's time that I go and work with these folks to help them get to market. I can probably do more good on the outside than on the inside.
So I've been in the business for 32 years, not 45. So my experience has ranged from the engineering side, where I did machine controls actually when I first started in the industry. Moved into the marketing. I did a lot of work with control systems and drivers. And then I took over, became the head of sales, and then actually ran over the business that was the largest ESCO in the US for quite some time. Did that and wanted to move to, I think, the more exciting part of the industry right now. I mean, really get to see a big change. I went from where we were relamping stores with fluorescent lamps, T8s all the time. Now we're into a whole new level of actually getting into and changing how these stores actually work, or buildings in general. So that's the exciting part. I think we're getting into an area that is much more interesting, much more and much more fulfilling for the customers as well too. Mm-hmm.
So I think, Benjamin, every time I talk to you, I just feel like I'm learning so much drinking from a fire hydrant. So I think that I really want to use the opportunity for you to share with all our audience here in the room today, the thing that you see in here. So I want to start with asking you a question about, tell us a little bit about SBT-Alliance, because I'm not sure how many of you out there know of this company. So give us a very quick, hey, this is what your company does. And then we can talk a little bit more about the connected lighting industry today, and based on what you see. And then later on, we can get a little more in terms of the customer journey. Put us in your shoes as you walk with your customer, deploy the solution, maintain and support that.
Got it. Okay. Well, and thank you for that opportunity. We do appreciate to be able to plug ourselves a little bit. So what the challenges that we had when I was on the actual controls manufacturer side was plain and simple. How do we get this to market? It doesn't fit in the same model. It's not a fluorescent light. It's not an occupancy sensor. It's all sorts of stuff in between. And I think a lot of the controls manufacturers ended up defaulting to selling it themselves. It was very challenging to actually inspire the channel to go out and sell these IoT solutions, these software-based solutions, because that wasn't in their skill set, it wasn't in their paradigm. There was a very specific way that projects got sold, and this wasn't how. So we figured, let's lead by example. And so hired salespeople to go out and sell projects. And that was one thing, because that was early on, and there were devices that were really challenging to work with. They were all spread out all over the building, wireless technologies everywhere. Everything was beta or early on, and so there were bugs flying all over the place. It's gotten cleaned up and it's gotten refined, and Bluetooth and Zigbee have gotten to a point where we're now seeing a real application, and people are buying into it. So now we realize, okay, this is actually happening. This technology is getting cost effective. We can integrate this into fixtures now, but who's going to do that? And I think there's a lot of folks in the industry that have been burned in the early days of trying to integrate controls into fixtures, and who takes responsibility, who actually commissions them, who owns them, is there support, what does the building look like afterwards, all those types of things. And there's some folks joining the industry now, or coming out like us, that are saying, we want to play in the middle. We want to enable this technology transfer and get it into the building. So that's what we've done. Realizing that this isn't about just installing controls in a building, it has to be integrated into a fixture at this stage. And in order to do that, there needs to be a middleman that paves the way for the fixture industry, for the controls industry to meet in the middle and to get deployed. And somebody needs to own it. Somebody needs to take the control of the design and of the implementation, the project management, and then support it. So we've created a business that touches each one of those areas, that works with the LED industry, that works with the controls industry, and are experts in software and support and service, and also then this next tier of say, well, where can we go with it? Can we start to leverage these networks? Can we participate in writing applications that actually take the IoT to where it's supposed to be, where we believe it can be, and to leverage the data and the controls and do things that aren't just cost savings, which is fine. We want to save costs. In fact, that's what gets it in the building. But let's actually start making money. Let's make revenue generating outcomes from these IoT networks. So that's what SBT is. We're an integrator in the market, and we're excited to be here. I think we have a unique model, and we want to work with everyone and help everyone get into a building.
Want anything to add?
No, I think Benjamin has summed it up pretty well. I think we've been around the industry so much that we know where the gaps are. We're experiencing a lot of different types of major companies, and I think we're looking at pretty much the leaders as being partners. Of course, Signify being one of those leaders. We believe that they're in the right path. We want to be able to work together with you and some other fixture makers and incorporate your technology into those systems and deploy them. We believe you've got the right solutions, and we want to be able to maximize that.
Speaking of leader, a plug for Signify as well, is that we have this so-called digital drivers as well as the analog driver, which obviously we recognize that not one size fits all. But having said that, I think the one thing I am a very big believer in is really the fact that everything is now connected, right? So when you think about any sort of retrofit or even new install, kind of behoove you not to consider laying down the digital foundation. Having the digital foundation give you the flexibility to do something that down the road you can able to extract information. Whereas if you're trying to save money by go with a cheaper solution, these light fixtures will be there for 5, 10, 15 years. You don't want to go into another situation, now we have to replace all of the LEDs because we can't do things that we should have done a couple years ago or 3 years ago. So we developed this digital driver, also known as Titanium SR, which stands for sensor ready. So sensor ready is a kind of an information bridge between the driver and also the control system. So the driver then have the built-in memory bank power metering, so you have all that capability at your fingertip. So you have this machine as a sensor of human experience, capturing all the data, send it to somewhere remote, and then you can use that information that become the, new gold in this digital age. So I think that's something I thought was very important, and you guys helped to bring that. So with that in mind, then tell us what is the biggest challenge that you've seen, and I think they share from that challenge or success stories that you can share with our audience. So what are the things that can do better, or things they need to watch out for?
Well, probably at the beginning stage, what we find probably the most important part is a really good design into a system, and it's not something you can cut short. Because while you might save a week of the project by minimizing the design on doing something correctly, you'll spend 10 weeks on the back end trying to fix all those mistakes that you had in that design. So what we learned is that you have to look at it, make sure you understand the requirements, and then make sure you design that and take that. Then you have to communicate that design to make sure everybody's aware of what you're trying to do. Because you have a lot of partners out there. It's not only the fixture makers, it's the people who are assembling the systems, but it's also the people installing it. So you have to spend a lot of good time making sure they're up to speed.
And that's, you kind of, every mistake that we've seen has spurred from something that has been led from the design to maybe underestimating the complexity of systems. And so, yes, even if you get a great design, which happens sometimes, once it gets on site, oftentimes another mistake is that we underestimate the need for commissioning. And so what ends up happening is whoever put the project together, whether it was a specifier, agent, or architect, or engineer, whoever it is that put this together, didn't quite understand the complexities of what was going to happen on site in order to deliver the real product. So the contractor didn't know how to bid it and figured, this is something that maybe, I'm just going to call the manufacturer. They're going to come out and do it, right? No, that's not how it works. So what ends up happening is you get out there and you maybe budgeted a couple $1,000s or something like that, and for a day, and it ends up being 2-3 weeks, and you have 5 people out there, and now the manufacturer's out there, and everybody's panicking because you have liquidated damages because the site was supposed to be open, a week ago, and that is a real issue of not truly appreciating the time and the complexity of making a system work. And if you understand that and you prep everybody and everybody knows, then it's fine, right? As long as you communicate it. But if you don't, it can be a lot of headaches.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about the technology. I think Signify, for example, this year we are very excited about the flex tune system. Right, it's a flex tune system, basically bring this tunable white into the office environment, healthcare, or education. And then it's new technology, we're excited, but as you said, it can be complicated, even though we have a pretty, I'll call it easy solution with the EasySense SNS, right? So still, I think that there are those who are maybe a little bit daunted by this technology, or they're used to the old way of working. So I think that we experienced it firsthand as well. We try to kind of lower the barrier. So with that in mind, what other kind of, I would call it the lessons or guideposts that you can offer to the audience as they think about the next lighting project, things that to watch out for?
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I would say is that one of the big challenges that we all have is just how to get it into a building from a sales perspective. So that's where it all starts. A salesman has a great idea or talks to a controls manufacturer, or these days it's kind of nice, the end user's actually asking for it, and that's helpful, right? I want advanced controls, I want wireless, I want it to be Title 24 compliant, or whatever that is that they're trying to meet. And so you say, oh, shoot, I got to go do that now. And let me figure that out. And let me figure out all the different values that I need to generate. So translating that conversation back to the designers and back to the implementers, that becomes, there's a lot of gaps in there. There's a lot of playing the telephone game, right? I want, this type of data, and before you know it, you're getting the opposite type of data, because that's what happens. So what we've noticed is in the sales process, the more people you can bring to the table that are parts of each one of the processes of implementation. So you bring, the sales guy's in there, he's managing the relationship. But then there needs to be a designer in the room. There needs to be the commissioner or the implementer in the room. We end up getting brought to the table by the major controls manufacturers that are selling a control system so that they can tell them how the thing's going to get installed, because they're not installing it, right? And how's it going to actually get commissioned and
Reading
support.
instruction.
Yeah.
Go figure it out. Nobody reads that.
The book. So yeah.
Also, the industry's kind of changing. When we first got in, it was a fire and forget. You got the material, you shipped it to the site, it was done. You were all done on that. Then we morphed into a license. The industry went from in the control side to a license scenario where someone said, well, what are you going to have to pay annually for the thing I already bought last year? It didn't work, so the licenses became a real problem. Now we've gone to another stage, and we talk about all the applications and the support and the software. And now when you're saying we'll do an ongoing support for you and being able to, not only do we keep the licenses may be part of that, but it's really about the ongoing support that we give to that site to keep it running correctly. And that's kind of been a change, I would say, in the sales process too. 5 years ago, no one wanted to buy their Microsoft operating system at home every year. So that's not going to happen. I want to buy it once and I'm done. Now most of us are paying on a yearly basis for our Microsoft. The whole industry is changing in that regard from the control side.
And we hope that we can inspire the industry through maybe some case studies and some white papers about old systems that have been installed that haven't been serviced, and what we can do to revitalize them, but also what could have been had they had someone in there supporting it. So yeah, I think a lot of the systems were sold in the early days as set it and forget it, and we all need to just realize that they aren't, and you do need to have some maintenance on them, and we can help with that.
So I want to kind of dive in a little more these two different scenarios, because for us, the lighting, you have either a retrofit, we have an Evo kit, and also we have the OEM that we'll work with their new fixtures for the new install. And then even for the retrofit, we have a company coming to Signify and say, hey, I want to put our sensor into even a retrofit kit. Right, so tell us a little bit more in terms of two different dynamic, new install versus retrofit, something interesting, insightful from your system integrator standpoint. Is there something unique?
Yeah, probably in the retrofit side, you always have to deal with the ROI word, which and that's always a challenge, because in today's environment, that return is much wider, much bigger, much more involved with. It's not just the savings. We talked about potentially changing some of your systems into revenue generating versus cost savings. So that revenue, that whole equation's upside down a little bit. So you have to be able to make sure you understand the full gains that you're going to get from for whatever system that you develop. So that's probably on the retrofit side, is dealing with that equation.
And then, of course, new construction, completely opposite, right? I mean, rarely does energy savings come into the discussion. Title 24 compliance or ASHRAE come into it, but actually looking at what is the cost savings from this, it should, and we try to engage the folks around that, but usually architects and lighting designers are just saying, look, we're just going to put LED in there. That's going to get us all the way. Or we're going to put some kind of advanced control. I don't know how it works, but it's going to be in there, and that's all we need to make sure of, right? And so delivering, it isn't that, just putting an advanced control system in gets you what you want. You have to make what you want out of that system. It's just like buying a phone that has no apps on it. If you want to get your bank statement, you have to download the app and log in and do all that kind of stuff. It doesn't do it until you do that. So on the new construction side, we have a bit of a gap between those that are specifying it, installing it, everything, and the ones that I think initially, if it was specified, if an end user, whoever it is, Google or Yahoo, or these folks that are kind of forward thinking and want advanced controls in their building, they'd say, the decree, I want Daintree or Unlighted or whatever that is in my building, and then it happens. But somewhere in the middle, there wasn't somebody there to actually make what they were dreaming of happen. So that it basically ends up looking just like an old BMS. So that's what happens in new construction. Retrofit, you got the ROI challenge, and of course, you have to be all over the design and understanding all the different values that you're generating. LEDs, 30-watt fixture, dimming that to 15 watts doesn't save you a lot of money. You know, it may one day. Utility rates raise every year. But today, we need to do something other than just dim it and turn it off occasionally.
Okay. Okay. And then I think you mentioned something I want to kind of focus on is that since you deal with the customers from the system integrator standpoint, do you feel that the kind of the audience that you need to influence to get their buy-in has a change, or is there any difference? How do you see that part of that sort of decision-making process? Because again, right, we're talking about OEM doing their thing, and then we as component manufacturers and provide stuff to the OEM. But to me, it's really what the connected lighting is about. You don't just have a facility manager. You may people say, hey, I want to be able to harness that digital assets, the information that flow through. So how does that improve efficiencies and whatnot? So is there any sort of insight with kind of looking ahead, this is what the next phase in terms of the whole sort of, get everybody on the table, how that is evolving over time?
Well, I think one of the things that we've noticed is that our customers are becoming much more advanced in their requirements and their demands. My 86-year-old mom has a Nest thermostat which she turns it up all the time on her phone. She never turns it down.
But spoiled.
So people are getting to understand it. It's part of their lives. Their cars are connected. Their houses are connected. They expect their buildings to be connected. And so we're having customers come to us. We want to be able to do this. And that's the important part in any kind of selling process, is really talking to your customer. And he may say, I want LEDs, but in all reality, they want to do something else. And engaging with that customer and finding that out, it's surprising how much more they want out of their systems. And they're asking for, they may not say, I want an indoor positioning system to track my valuable assets in my building. But say, I sure as hell can't find that flux capacitor that's somewhere in my building. I need to find that today. So that's the kind of, when you have those discussions and you come up with, at least, as you said, put the foundation in there, the titanium driver being one of the best parts of that. Get the foundation in there so that your system can grow. You've said it often, Benjamin, you've got one shot now. You're changing from traditional lighting to LEDs. Do it right so that it can grow with you in the future. If you put LED tubes in, in 5 years, you're pretty much done. There's not much else you can grow into that. So that's the kind of important part, having that, engaging with your customers, understanding their wants and needs, and try to convey that into a plan or a design that makes sense for them, not only today, but going into the future.
Building on that, one of the things that, we went back to bringing in a team to deal with an end user. I think the old sales model was a sales guy goes in and sells, a widget, right? And that's successful to a certain degree. We can't be experts in everything. I don't claim to be an expert in anything. You don't. We have our lane, but there's things that I don't know that I don't know. So with a platform like this, it's really important that if you actually want to leverage it, that you bring the people that know how to leverage it in. So there are so many partners, there's so many that we have, but there's so many folks out there that are developing software applications to work with through the APIs to access this data, to bring more to the table. So you go out, you research that, you find out who are the folks that are doing people counting or occupational productivity gains, and what maybe somebody's looking to create an app for a particular segment. Let me help them, bring them to the table, and now we can have a much greater discussion where we say lighting is a foregone conclusion. You're gonna do that. That's what sets the network up. Let's talk about what we can do with that. If you can lead that way in the sale, you'll get a lot further than, I want to sell you a lighting retrofit project. Here's the payback. Oh, and I can add some stuff. And you're already too expensive to begin. Don't talk to me about adding anything. And then, of course, as a sales guy, you're going to leave it off as soon as they say no the first time. But if you say you have problems you don't even know you can solve right now, and there's technology out there that's kind of begging to come in here and solve these problems for you, let's talk about those. And by the way, isn't it kind of cool that I'm going to be able to solve those and have it paid for by a utility rebate and the savings? That's pretty cool, right? And then you move on.
So where do you see the industries moving towards? What is going now versus what you would like it to be if everything's work out the way that you see it should be, to be more effective and more frictionless? I think that's what the term I heard that before, more frictionless, because you have all the different barriers, the building owners, the contractors, people who do the commissioning. So there's all of the learning curve, all of the different steps they have to jump through, right? So give us a little bit more insight on that.
Well, let me start off by connectivity. I mean, to be able to have one device work with another device, I think Nest made an announcement recently where they're only going to close down their connectivity to other systems beyond just Google. That's backwards, that's going backwards. What we want to see is that more and more devices are more interconnected to be able to communicate with that system, and that system. It's the way our homes work with a lot of different devices. Our Ecobee thermostat communicates to our lighting, and that's the way I look at it. For us to succeed in this industry, we can't create silos. We have to create a pretty robust, open, competitive. It's always good for the customers at the end of the day. A lot of different good systems that either have the best features or the best cost, whatever they're best at. They can really play that angle and use that and leverage it to make a successful business model for themselves. That's the connectivity is what I'm focusing on. I think is probably the most important part to make it into the next level.
No doubt. And right now we're vetting out how you actually work with these systems. APIs are all very young and early on. Every manufacturer says they have them, but do they actually have them available for full interaction? Are they two-way? Can I control, or is it just read? Those types of things need to get vetted out. And so I envision one day all the APIs are just set. You can interact with these systems. You can write your own user interfaces, and that will pull the controls manufacturers out of the need to be user interface writers, and it will actually separate those out. One, you can either write some amazing user interfaces for applications that you want to use these networks for, or you can be really good at creating a network that many different devices that can connect on, like you were saying. So those, and I think, I came from Daintree, so we were preaching interoperability and open standards for years, and I think my perception back then was it was an either or. So you're either open or you're closed, proprietary, right? I don't think that's necessarily the case today, and we're seeing some manufacturers who are saying, I can't write it to the standard, because the standard really isn't made for what I'm trying to accomplish. There's things that I need to do to change it. Otherwise, it's going to get too nutty, and I can't control how everybody else is going to do their stuff. However, I can write my proprietary firmware for what I need to do, but I can still use the technology, the Bluetooth or the Zigbee, to enable others to hop on my network. And just because their stack's a little bit different, we're going to enable them to play on the network, and you can, through our API, access them and do whatever you want. So let's actually create a standard network that, yes, other folks might do some interesting things in their firmware that don't really help them work together, but they're necessary, right? So I do believe, and once that can happen where it needs to be interoperable, we can't put a system in that only sensors from one company work on that network. That's death to the building.
Right, because I think the one thing I realized, and many of you I'm sure that you recognize, is that a lot of times a building may have different phases of retrofit, lobby first, and then offices later, and then different light fixtures, right? And then you have different tenant move in, do the all of that stuff. So just expecting that you have the monopoly of an entire building or entire floor is a little bit wishful thinking, and that's the reason why, like through the SR interface from Signify, for example, we have a slew of a company who want to work with us, and even those who had a proprietary system before, they recognize the simplicity of the two-wire solution, open D4I, the DALI for IoT, for example, the ANSIs and the DIIA. With the Signify being a global company, we kind of rally around the industry to taking the charge, say, hey, we need to embrace that openness. And that openness obviously foster innovation and more competition, and then end customer benefit as a result of that.
You know, honestly, that's why we're here. And to give you a plug, we've been working together for the last year and trying to help get you into this market. Anyone that's supporting standards and interoperability and not trying to own the entire segment. So Robert and I always